Hello, everybody. Welcome.
Shalom, shalom. It's good to see those of you I see, and if people want to turn their cameras on, we can see each other. And I'm happy to be here. Hope you're happy to be here as well. Tonight we're going to talk about the most performed or not mitzvah of the Jewish people. So tonight we're going to learn about and talk about kashrut, or about sanctifying our eating. And before, or as a precursor to doing this, I would love for you to share a story or your story about keeping kosher or not. If you feel good about it, you don't feel good about it, knowing that this is a judgment-free zone. I will start by saying I grew up in a home that was not kosher, but I'm one of very few people who kept kosher out of the home and not in. Right? Most people say, oh, I keep kosher at home, but not out. But I, as a child at Camp Ramah in the Poconos, I saw that the kids who did stuff and were involved in Jewish life kept kosher. And I asked my parents when I was 10 if I could keep kosher, and they said, sure, whenever you're not in our house. So I spent until age 18 keeping kosher out, but not in. When I went to college, when I came back for Thanksgiving from my first semester in college, my parents had, unbeknownst to me, redone their kitchen and also made it kosher at the same time. They wanted me to feel totally comfortable eating in their home. And then later on, for those many, many, many years after, it became a value of theirs as well. That's my story. Who's going next? Because everyone has a kosher story. And even if the kosher story is, I used to keep kosher and now I love cheesesteaks, which, by the way, I'm from Philadelphia. It is hard not to eat cheesesteaks. Denise, you're up.
So I did not come from a kosher home, but I babysat for people who kept a kosher home. So I was about 14 or 15 years old, and I said, that's what I want to do when I live on my own. And that's what I started doing. So I made sure that the person I married was okay with being kosher. He did not come from a kosher home, even though most of his family was kept a kosher home. So that's what I did, and haven't looked back.
And what is one thing that gives you joy about keeping kosher?
Actually, I just like being different than the norm.
Nice, thank you. Okay, who's going next? And you don't have to go. It's nice to hear people's stories, because all our stories are actually equal in importance. Ellen, I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, it's been a few minutes. So I know you heard a little bit of this. I grew up in a very secular home. Trace as could be, Jewish identity, but kashrut was never anything considered. I always thought about it. My husband was raised in a kosher home. And when we got married, I decided I wanted to have a kosher home. It took a long time, and it wasn't until we were living in Georgia that our Rabbi Shalom Lewis, knew I wanted to. He said, you're going to kosher your home. And I said, well, isn't it hypocritical to have a kosher home and not keep kosher outside? And he said, you know what? You start small and you'd be surprised you're going to end big. And a couple of years later, he koshered my home. My son was not very happy, but he had to live by it. And then Rabbi Lewis was in the Soviet Union in the 80s, and he came back and made a sermon about the refuseniks and how he had to smuggle books and mezuzahs and things to them. And they could not observe Judaism in public. And I swear it was like an epiphany, lightning struck, I don't know. At that moment, I said, you know what? I can keep kosher all the time because I have the freedom to do it. And from that, I said, I'm going to do it for a year, just in protest, just to show that I have the freedom. And that was about 30 some odd years ago. And I still observe kashrut in and out.
And out means dairy out, or vegetarian out?
Fish or vegetarian, yeah, dairy or fish.
And the reason I said that clarifying question is I was recently I'll tell you a funny story, but don't tell anyone. Oh, we're recording this. I was recently at the Ivy, Princeton's dive bar, with a group of the Mercer County rabbis. They were having a l'chaim for me to welcome me to the community, which was lovely a couple months ago. And it was so interesting that, like, who eats what? Who will eat nothing there? Who will eat cold there? And who will eat cooked there? And everyone said they kept some degree of kashrut, but there's that, you know, unless you're in an Orthodox community, which even their Orthodox Jews will eat out. If you're in an ultra-Orthodox community, we all keep kashrut out to varying degrees. Who wants to go next? Anyone? Yeah, Myra, the deliverer of Shiva meals.
Thank you. I grew up in a reform home. We did not keep kosher. And I remember eating bacon and all that stuff that's not kosher, but I was inspired by my reform rabbi in high school to go to an Orthodox college, and that was Yeshiva University. And there, everybody kept kosher, everybody kept Shabbat, and so I started doing that. And when I finished school 4 years later, I decided to continue kosher on my own. I was single for a while. It was at least 5 years, I think, before I got married, and I have always kept kosher on my own since. And Shabbat, not quite as like the Orthodox, but certainly some measure of recognition and observance.
And is there something that you feel is meaningful about it? One thing for you, or has been meaningful?
Well, sometimes it's hard, like at Passover, when you have to have a whole nother set of pots and pans and dishes. I've just grown used to it. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say tonight, because I don't always find a spiritual aspect to it.
Great.
I'm looking for that.
Yeah. Okay, good. Anyone else want to talk? Give a story. Suzanne.
My favorite story is actually about my dad. When he was an infant, his maternal grandparents lived with them, and they came from Europe. And he was, I'm sure you're surprised, very small and very underweight. And the pediatrician told them that they should feed him bacon. Although, because my grandmother's parents were with them, they were keeping kosher. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been. And so my father's grandmother, said, okay, it's fine, because he needs to put on the weight. So that's my favorite kosher story. We did not keep kosher growing up.
It's interesting because I've heard that story from that generation quite a bit. Does anyone else want to share a story? Yeah, Suzanne.
Do you see my hand is
I'm
raised? Oh, sorry.
what?
I don't.
Oh, I was always very ignorant about being kosher. My parents joined a Reformed temple when I was 8 years old, and actually nobody there that I knew ever kept kosher. I mean, they ate shrimp and lobster and everything else. And so the first person I met that was kosher, that kept kosher, was a guy in high school. And his family kept kosher. However, they would bring in non-kosher food into the house with newspapers. And I think in my mind, I identified being kosher with being hypocritical. I think that's where it came to for me. And I honestly believed until my 30s that, and which is so ignorant of me, that all people who kept kosher actually had this double standard that they could eat out and eat whatever they wanted, but then like when they went home. And that really, I really got knocked off my chair when my son was 9 years old. He brought a friend home who was kosher, kept kosher. And I told the mother that I would do my best to give him, you know, I don't know what to give him, but I'll give him something for dinner. And then I said, oh, I'll take him out for dinner because he can eat out if he's kosher. He can eat. If you can imagine all the mistakes I made. So that's the history of me with. And then she was so upset with me. She was screaming at me. You took my jewel and you fed him this food. It was hysterical. Anyway.
Yeah, that's hard. If you have special eating needs, you got to tell the other parent. Yeah. Diane, you're up.
Okay, so we did not keep kosher at the house. My father grew up in a kosher home. So that was something that was somewhat important to him, but we didn't have a kosher house. But what we what we did have every now and then in our house was what my mother referred to as zebra meat, which was Canadian bacon. So for some reason, they wouldn't bring bacon in, strip bacon, but they round bacon, Canadian bacon, and my mother referred to it as zebra meat. And you know, in the realm of our family, that was okay. Nothing else came into the house. Zebra meat, which is Canadian bacon.
So interesting. I was telling Ellen this story earlier that I feel like in so many families, even if you didn't keep kosher in any strict sense of that word, there was still, for many of us, something that was or was not done. So let's say you didn't keep kosher, but it would be a shanda to serve milk while you're actually serving a pot roast. How many of you have a story like that? Yeah, it's right. By the way, what is the definition of a kosher style restaurant? If something's called kosher style, what's another way of calling that?
Not mixing meat and dairy.
Trafe.
Trafe. Thank you, Janet. Trafe, right. A great lesson learned from my teacher, Rabbi Brody at the Jewish Theological Seminary. There was a proliferation all among the East Coast and among the whole country of Jewish delis. And I got to tell you that I have to tell you, they are the bane of my existence, to walk in a place that looks like a duck and walks like a duck, but where I can't have a corned beef sandwich, where it is a Jewish style or kosher style, because kosher style means treif. So I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to take it back now and start talking about why would you do this? Why this mitzvah, which I believe, frankly, besides Torah study, is the mitzvah that influences our sense of Jewishness more than any other. Why? It's 3 times a day, unless it's a fast day, which, by the way, today was a fast day. So, okay, it was the 10th of Tevet, when the walls of Jerusalem were breached for the first time. But besides that, it's, you know, there's no other activity that we do as much as eating. And so this idea of sanctifying how we eat, stopping and making it different, is so central to who we are. Rashi, the great rabbinic commentator, you know, talks about 2 different kinds of mitzvot, right? So we have mitzvot that are logical, and we have mitzvot that you really can't find any logic for, you just do them. This is one that all the rabbis say you can't actually find a reason for. You're not going to find a reason in the Torah for why you have to keep kosher. You're going to find the verse, Lo tivashel gidi v'chalev imo. Don't boil a kid in its
Mother's milk.
Mother's milk. So here's some questions. Why can't I have chicken parmesan? Chickens don't have milk. Why can't I have, yeah, Janet, did you want to jump in?
The rabbis build gezerot around the mitzvot, and because most people think that chicken is meat, rather than to confuse you, they extended it to poultry as well.
But not to eggs, right? Not to
But
the
not to
proper
eggs.
poultry. Which is also such an interesting, that's a gezerah, that's an beautiful explanation. The idea that we get very little instruction in the Torah on how to keep kosher. We get, don't boil a kid in its mother's milk. We get, don't eat aver min hachai, which is the piece of an animal that would be broken off, let's say if you're hunting. And we get, make sure your fish have snapir v'kaskeset, fins and scales. Everything else, those are the deoraita laws from the Torah. All the other laws of kashrut were laws that were built up so that we would not break the original laws. How many of you who keep kosher do, so I'm gonna put text up in a moment, but how many of you who do keep kosher use hechshers versus ingredients? Hechshers? Ingredients? Can't hear you.
So you mean buying food that is hechshered? Is
Buying
that
food, only food that is hechshered versus food where the ingredients are not dairy, not meat.
Yep.
So there's that whole discussion as well. We're going to talk a little bit about how the kashrut how kashrut has grown, and then I want to throw out to you a term that I want to see if anyone has heard the term eco kashrut. Eco kashrut. What can you tell me about it?
Well, it's observation of labor laws. It goes much further than just the animals. It has to do with the environment, eating less beef so we don't have as much methane. I mean, it goes way beyond just the laws in the Torah, but it has to do with the world. And,
So that's something we'll talk about a little bit later. If you had to think of all the reasons why we keep kosher or why one would want to keep kosher, I think what Denise said earlier is one of the most important. It keeps us different and special. My own personal reason, though, says so in the Torah, and this is how we identify as Jews. Also, third, nothing is done, no mitzvah happens more than maybe saying brachot. When someone said, I'm looking for some inspiration, well, I think one of the inspirations that we have while keeping kosher is also to think about two other mitzvot. One is ma'achil re'evim, feeding the hungry, and the other is the making of brachot, of having gratitude. So I think that the next level for those of us who do keep kosher, beyond just the actual meat and dairy and which hechshers you have, and the fact that like this Shabbat, I'm planning on making shrimp salad with the OU fake shrimp that I get from the kosher supermarket. Besides that, the values of this are making brachot, noticing what we have, and then making sure others have as well. So for me, food has always been like, I had a grandmother that owned a restaurant, owned a luncheonette. She was a great cook. I have a mom that loved to cook. But it seemed to be, how can you keep kosher without also thinking about those who have nothing to eat? How can you keep kosher without also worrying about the workers in the factories who produce our kosher meat and chicken and food? So it's larger than just don't boil a kid in its mother's milk. All right, I'm going to share, but does anyone have any comments or questions or things you want to argue about? Denise, yeah.
Can you tell me what the word is that has to do with the factory workers and laborers and stuff? What was that again?
Eco kashrut.
Echo. Okay.
Yeah, it's just looking at kashrut in a larger sense of not just laws of what we eat, but how we get our food as well, and what our food does to the world.
And I have one question. Oh, sorry, Ellen, go ahead.
I was just going to say for your, I've also heard it described as ethical kashrut.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if you're going to touch on this, but I was wondering what your thoughts are on, you said you're going to make like a shrimp dinner. Like, what are your thoughts on when we have bacon bits, but they're soy, right? Or stir fry, bacon stir fry, but it's the beef stir fry. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I think this is how you feel about it. I feel like I observe kashrut because everything in my home is hechshered, and I, have wait 3 hours between milk and meat, but I also know that bacon is soy protein. I eat veggie burgers all the time, and I put cheese on them. So do I think I'm keeping kosher? Of course, I am actually keeping kosher. I don't know an issue. I know that many people do. I think the more interesting questions right now are about the meat that is being created through genetic processing, and right. So it's not necessarily considered meat. That feels like really a substantive question in terms of, okay, if it's a genetic reproduction of a pig, is it still a pig? Are you uncomfortable eating like soy that looks like a hamburger with cheese? Yeah. Michael, did you want to say something?
I was just curious if there is a rabbinic debate on, protein-based food that is trying to imitate bacon or, anything that's unkosher. Is there a rabbinic debate whether that is considered kosher or not?
Yeah, so there is within the Orthodox world a little bit, but I can tell you that even in Israel, the badats and the rabbanut kashrut, the hechshers that are given by the Orthodox rabbanut are absolutely fine. There's a place in Jerusalem where you can go and get fake soy meat with fake soy cheese and get your Italian hoagie. So there is a debate, and the debate is based on marat ayin, on how it looks. On the other hand, I mean, the first place where this debate happened was actually probably about 30 or 40 years ago with non-dairy creamer. That was the first place it happened. Mm-hmm. So what the Orthodox ruling was on it, anyone know, with non-dairy creamer? So tacky. The ruling was you're supposed to put the container that says non-dairy with the OU on your table so that people know for sure this is non-dairy. Of course, as someone who's a foodie, I'm like, oh, you taste it and you're going to know it's non-dairy. It's bad. But yeah, so the idea is that you need to show people, or at least that's in the rabbinic circles, that it is absolutely what you're serving. So, and actually, like, I have at the kosher supermarket in Northeast Philadelphia, which if you keep kosher, I encourage you to go to because it is so much fun. It's called House of Kosher. It's 45 minutes from here. Have any of you been there? Yeah, it's a large kosher supermarket. They have takeout sushi, they have takeout pizza, they have takeout meat, everything. They also have takeout pulled pork. I mean, brisket. It's called pulled brisket, but it really is a play on pulled pork. They have bacos, they have all that kind of stuff. So even in the Orthodox world, the OU gives their hechsher to these things. So if there were really a problem, the Orthodox Union would not be giving its hechsher. I don't know if you know the big change that rocked my world. So for years and years, the Orthodox Union, which gives a lot of hechsherim, a lot of the kosher symbols, certifications, they have OU, they have OU Parv and OUP. What's OUP? Passover. And OU Parv is OU Parv. And then they had something called OUDE. It doesn't exist anymore. Anyone know what DE was? was my favorite thing in the world. OUDE meant dairy equipment. So ginger snaps in the orange and black box were OUDE. And you could actually call the company and say, do they have any dairy in them? No. And so you'd be able to make them with a meat meal. But the right wing, more observant end of the Orthodox Union said, we're not going to do that anymore. The equipment, even though it's been washed at high temperature, even though it's now kosher, nope, it's only dairy now. Sad. Okay, I'm going to start sharing. Do you know the song, by the way? Can't believe I'm doing this on recording. Ellen Yuchi Cheaper School, one of my favorite songs. Ready? All the animals that we eat must chew their cud and have split feet. Kosher meat just can't be beat, so throw away the pork chops. Because, you know, you want to make it fun as well for kids. Although I have to say, for me, there's nothing more meaningful than knowing that there's some discipline to how we eat. There's nothing more meaningful than knowing that I now know, I didn't know before, that Denise shops at the same place I do, and I could come and eat anything at her house.
My favorite kashrut book for kids is Fins and Scales.
Love it.
Love that one too.
Let me see if I can share this.
I think you're the one that told me to buy that for my kids, Ellen.
Probably, I've been reading it for 100 years. Yeah.
Suzanne, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. My parents have a place down the shore, and I think that as people who started to keep kosher in their, you know, late 50s, 60s, they took such pride from being part of the group of people in their large building that you could always borrow a little bit of non-dairy creamer from. There's that internal language of who else will have it. Okay, I'm gonna share if I can. Let's see. No, I gotta try this again. Let me see if I can do it again. Hold on. Nope. Do you see my screen? Can you see?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. It's so interesting because sharing a PDF is radically different than sharing a Word document.
Okay, but Rabbi, we see your email.
You don't see the purpose of kashrut?
Not yet.
Oh, it says you are screen sharing.
You are, but if you unscreen share and then maybe choose a different window.
I'll try.
Okay.
You'd think after 5 years of using Zoom, I would get it, but it's the PDF thing. It's not there. How about I email it to you?
Okay, and I'll put it up. You can tap dance in the meantime.
It's not letting me, hold on. Wait, now it says files. Maybe it'll let me share that.
There was a PDF on your emails from that.
I know, and that's what I opened, and it is open. Well, I'm so sorry. I can't believe this is still, oh, let me try it again. Now, do you see it? Hold on.
Not yet.
Hold on.
Unfortunately, we didn't have time to rehearse this dance.
We didn't because I was with a bar mitzvah kid. Sorry.
Much more important. I know you guys are so patient. Thank you very much.
I apologize. How about now?
Perfect.
Okay. Learning on the go. So I wanted to go through these, like, why keep kosher? And they're really small. It's hard for you to read this, right? Can you read it or no?
Not really.
How about now?
Header,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, so who would like to read Rabbi Samuel Dresner? He wrote in 1959, The Jewish Dietary Laws, The Meaning for Our Times. If you want a copy, I'll get you a copy. It's the small book that probably Rabbi Shalom Lewis gave to the Ellen when she started to keep kosher. It's white with a green cover, and it's pretty small, and it's like not in gender inclusive language, but it's beautifully written. So Reverence for Life. Ellen, can you read that one for us?
The permission to eat meat is to be seen as a compromise, a divine concession to human weakness and human need. The Torah, as it were, says, I would prefer that you abstain from eating meat altogether, for to eat meat, the life of an animal must be taken, and that is a fearful act. But since you are imperfect, and since your desires cannot be stopped, they must at least be controlled. You may eat meat, but with a restriction that you have reverence for the life that you take.
Okay, so how many of us think about our kashrut in terms of thinking about what, not just meat, but where all of our food comes from? I was going to unshare, but I'm not going to unshare because I'd like to see everyone's face because I'm afraid that I won't be able to share again. So do any of you think about your keeping kosher as a way of thinking about the food chain? Well, it might be something to think about, that our way of hopefully having an animal suffer less or eating less animals is one reason why many people choose to keep kosher. Okay, Mordechai Kaplan. Denise, since this is your reason, can you read this one? Jewish distinctiveness.
Kashrut has served as a means of Jewish identification and distinctiveness. In that way, kashrut has contributed to the perpetuation of the Jewish people and the retention of its way of life. The urgency for strengthening whatever factors in Jewish life make for survival is even greater now than in the past. The observance of kashrut commends itself as a means to this end, precisely because it can be practiced by any Jew. It is particularly effective in lending a Jewish atmosphere to the home, which in the diaspora is our last-ditch defense against the inroads of assimilation.
Oh my God, look what year he wrote this. 1956, and Kaplan is complaining about assimilation. This is the beginning of when Jews are moving out of cities and moving into these large conservative shuls all over the country. And he calls this our last ditch effort. Wow, so hard, so hard. So I can't agree with him more that there's nothing that will make you feel more Jewish than keeping kosher. So let me ask you something. Why do you think people don't?
Did you ask why people don't?
Yeah.
I think for a couple of reasons. I think it's more to think about for some people. Although those of us who keep it, we realize that it doesn't take much thought, right? But I think when you don't grow up with it, it takes more thought at the beginning. And also there's a financial burden. At least I feel the financial means of it more than anything. And I think that's one reason why people say that they're not going to keep kosher.
Yeah, I agree. Anyone else? Because I think they don't want the distinctiveness. That actually, in those years, Kaplan was responding to that sense of, wait, we want to be like everyone else in America. I think we're in the last ditch effort now more than we were then. And if you want to really feel a sense of Jewishness, start with one thing. So I say to people who are about to keep kosher, it's not all or nothing. Begin slowly. Cut one thing out, add one thing. Don't have milk and meat. Okay, I'm going to keep going.
So Rabbi,
Yes, who's speaking?
Janet,
Thank you.
the thing about keeping kashrut is if you actually keep kashrut in and out of the house, it's hard to have non-Jewish friends because you can't break bread with them. You can't celebrate with them. So it
Yes.
keeps people separate that way. And I think that's also a reason why people don't want to keep kosher, because they don't want to be restricted that way.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I'm one of those people, which is why I, like Ellen, eat vegetarian out. I went through a phase, I will tell you, when I lived in New York, where I only ate in kosher restaurants. And I felt that barrier. So I do agree with you. Does anyone here only eat at kosher restaurants? Yeah, I'm looking in the chat. I think someone put something in the chat. Can I make the screen larger? I will try.
Rabbi?
So yeah,
Can I just offer another aspect? So some of us who don't keep kosher
Yeah.
don't have Jewish spouses, and and although they have graciously, from their perspective, bought into everything else in a Jewish family,
yeah,
you know, it just was not a priority.
Yep.
And I understand what you're saying, but there are some of those other factors that could come in for other folks.
absolutely. And so I'm one of them. And my story is that, right, as I guess from the age of 11 to 18, I lived in a home where I only kept kosher out. And I actually think that was great for me to learn about kashrut as a way to balance and to think about where our food comes from, and to think about this as a commandment from God. But let me tell you the why I only kept kosher at home. One of my rabbis at the time, when I was a little bit older, was an Orthodox rabbi, the rabbi in the school I went to a Jewish day school. And I said to him, you know, this is terrible. I'm not going to eat in my parents' house, because, right, I was a petulant teen, like most teens are. And what he said to me is, why is respecting your parents any less of a mitzvah than keeping kosher? So I bring that to the rest of my family as well. Why would respecting, I mean, yeah, you have to respect your spouse, you have to respect your family and balance it. He was right when he said to me, you eat in your parents' house until you leave your parents' house. And then you still eat in your parents' house, and you find a way to both be with family and do this. And for me, that was, I ate what they served when I was a kid, when I was a teen. And I was outside at a restaurant, I made different choices. It's not for everyone. And it's also, as I said, maybe kashrut is saying, I'm going to think about Jewish eating. And that can be just, you know, the thought process of one thing, one piece of it. But I agree. You know, one's relationship with their spouse has to be more important. In the same way that one's relationship growing up with their parents had to be more important. That too is a value. On the other hand, there are ways to do aspects of kashrut in our lives that make us on that spectrum of kashrut and that bring a sense of meaning. So let's talk about the mindful consumption. Rabbi Chaim Halevi Donin, again, To Be a Jew, A Guide to Contemporary Observance. Who wants to read? I made it a little bigger.
I'll read.
Thank you.
The biblical call to holiness is reflected in Judaism's attempt to elevate the satisfaction of all basic urges for food, drink, sex, in which we differ not from any beast, onto a level worthy of man. Kashrut is a good example of how Judaism raises even the most mundane acts, the most routine activities, into a religious experience. What narrower minds look upon as a picayune concern with trifling kitchen matters is really an example of how Judaism elevates the mere physical satisfaction of one's appetite into a spiritual act by its emphasis on the ever-present God and our duty to serve God at all times. Rabbi Chaim Halevi Donen.
Yeah, so for me, this is one of those elements of I eat more than I do anything else. Maybe walk the dog. I probably there should be a blessing for walking your dog since I do that more. But I eat more than I do anything else. And so there should be ways of thinking about how I eat in a Jewish way. And as Chaim Halevi Donen says, we have rules around food, drink, and sex. All of those passion places. In the Talmud, we're taught that we have these rules, litzaref bahem et habriot, to refine our personalities. To refine our personalities, which is, it's a hard thing to say. I'm not going to eat the, by the way, I did love bacon cheeseburgers. And as someone from Philadelphia, I know what scrapple is and Canadian bacon, and to then make that choice. Like, I think my kashrut's harder than other people's because I started, or like Denise, I know how good the stuff is. Yeah, I do, and I miss it. And also, it's a discipline, a holy discipline. Okay, so Maimonides, like we've proven wrong. Okay, physical health. To eat any of the various kinds of food that the Torah prohibits for us is unwholesome. The major reason why the Torah abhors pork is because it is dirty and feeds on dirty things. This is the rabbis teach in the Talmud. The mouth of a swine is like walking excrement. So I think that we have learned that that is not true. Right? You can absolutely, look, you can be a vegan. You can eat well and not eat kosher. So really, this is about a spiritual health and not a physical health. Okay, we're going to go over some of the Torah prohibitions. Good?
Actually, I have a question, Rabbi.
Yes, who is it? I can't see.
Janet, I'm sorry, it's Janet.
No. Hi, Janet.
Because it
I
seems
would
to me
unshare,
that,
but I'm not going to unshare.
that's okay. It seems to me that Maimonides did all of us Jews a disservice by giving that commentary, because that's the main reason that people who don't keep kosher will say, and they say, well, it's just not true today, and so there's no reason to keep kosher anymore. Somehow or another, that's the one explanation that seems to have spread among all Jews.
I agree with you 100%. And at some point, the pandemic should be over and I could have you all over for a Shabbos meal. I hope, God willing, someday. And you will see that I have a strange collection. I collect pigs. I collect the art of pigs. So there's like pigs hanging up in my house. I have little figurines. Friends buy me pigs. I got a pig ice cream scoop, because I actually say, I take more of the like Hindu view. We don't eat pig because God loves that animal more. I do agree with you that it is damaged. Like I said, what Maimonides wrote is not true and has caused us harm, has caused kosher harm. So I like to say, yeah, pigs are, they're all sacred animals to God. We don't eat this one. We don't eat it because it doesn't have split hooves and chew its cud. Not that it's a dirty animal. But, you know, not every rabbi can get everything right all the time. So Maimonides got that one. Maybe it was right for that time. Maybe there was more trichinosis and they didn't know how to get it out. But I agree with you 100%. It is not a good thing for us to think of kashrut as a health thing. We know many of unhealthy, obese Jews who keep kosher but don't take care of themselves. So I agree with you. Couldn't agree more. Who would like to read about the prohibitions from the Torah? Any readers?
I'll
Michael,
read
you'll
it.
do it? Okay, so I wanted to just, before you read that first sentence, read the first sentence and then stop, because I got a question about it.
These are the land animals you may eat.
No. The
No,
top
do
sentence.
not eat any abomination.
Okay, so abomination maybe is when, I don't know, what's an abomination? Maybe an abomination is like a double bacon cheeseburger because it's gluttonous and is going to give you a heart attack. I think that the Torah saying don't eat any abomination meant one thing in the Torah and means something quite different today. Okay. Now you can go on with what the animals that you may eat.
These are the land animals you may eat. The ox, the sheep, the goat, the deer, the gazelle, the roe deer, the wild goat, the ibex, the antelope, and the mountain sheep. You may eat any animal that has a split hoof and that chews the cud. However, of those that chew the cud, or that have a split hoof, you may not eat: the camel, the rabbit, or the hyrax. Although they chew the cud, they do not have a split hoof. They are impure for you. The pig is also impure. Although it has a split hoof, it does not chew the cud. You are not to eat their meat or touch their carcasses.
Okay, let's stop for a second. Is there an overriding principle here for folks? Chew their cud and have split feet. That's it. So what will happen though with kashrut is over the generations, the rabbis continue to add to the rules. I think maybe Janet said earlier about how we put fences around our rules. So these are the rules, but later we'll get, well, how is the animal killed? And who had their hands on this? So these are the original, but they grow. By the way, I have never eaten wild goat, antelope, or mountain sheep, or gazelle, or an ox. Have any of you? Yeah, I just wouldn't know where to get it. Okay, so what does it say? The pig is also, it's impure, but that's all I know. All right, let's do the water ones.
Of all the creatures living in the water, you may eat any that has fins and scales. But anything that does not have fins and scales, you may not eat. For you, it is impure.
For you, by the way, not for everyone in the world, just for just for Jews. So, by the way, if you're out, how do you find out what fish you can eat when you're out at a restaurant?
I
So
usually look it up on my phone.
Exactly. You can look up, there's lots of different kosher fish, kosherfish.com, all of those you can figure out based on, does it have fins and scales? So here's the question. What about swordfish?
There's been a debate about that one.
Yes. What's, anyone know the debate?
Is it
Well,
because a swordfish is born with scales and eventually loses them?
That is correct. That is correct. That's the debate. So do you eat them or not? I will say there are definitely conservative folks who eat swordfish. I'm not one of them, but there definitely, I know plenty who do, who say at some point in its life, especially if they can get it from the fish person with the fins and scales on it.
I assume that this whole category is in that area that Rashi says does not have any logic to it. You do it because God says do it.
No logic whatsoever. Exactly. These are the rules that we are taught to do because we're taught to do. This is what makes us distinct, Denise. This is what makes us identify as Jews. And Rashi knew enough to say, don't try to find some logic in this. These are the mitzvot where we say, do it, na'aseh v'nishma. Do it, and after you're doing it, you'll understand how important it can become to you. Okay, we're going to keep going. I know it's a lot of lines, but I wanted you to see all the kosher lines from the Torah.
You may
Okay,
eat any pure bird, but these you may not eat: the eagle, the vulture, the black vulture, the kite, any kind of falcon, any kind of raven, the horned owl, the screech owl, the seagull, any kind of hawk, the little owl, the great owl, the white owl, the desert owl, the osprey, the cormorant, the ostrich, the stork, any kind of heron, the hoopie, and the bat. All flying insects are impure for you. Do not eat them. But any winged creature that is clean, you may eat.
okay.
Do not
So
eat.
wait, hold on. So do you
Sure.
has anyone ever had grasshopper? You can find kosher grasshopper. No, thank you. Don't bring it to me as a gift. I'm not interested. And it's funny. Have any of you ever had a pet bird? Because I've had pet parakeets. So when they say you may eat any pure bird, I'm like, no, every bird is dirty. They are dirty animals. So yeah, they're all kind of dirty and gross. Let me ask you, what two birds are not in here?
Turkey.
Yeah, and chicken, turkey and chicken. So turkey, Michael Golden, you might be interested in learning that there is a very large debate among the rabbinic scholars about turkey. There is an entire line of rabbinic scholars who are the descendants of a Tosafist, of someone who commented on the Talmud. His name was Yom Tov Littman Heller, and his descendants don't eat turkey. To this day, I have a professor from JTS who's now retired, Rabbi Ann Lapidus Lerner, and her family is a descendant of the Yom Tov Littman Hellers, and their family doesn't eat turkey because he decreed that we don't know what this bird is, and so it's not kosher. Most Jews think it is, but okay. Okay,
So I
do
have a
not-
question where it said, do not touch their carcasses, a couple of paragraphs above.
Yes.
I was once at a meeting, it was headed by a rabbi, and we were asking him different questions. And the question that was posed to him is, if there was an Orthodox person that owned a supermarket, or could an Orthodox person own a supermarket where it sold kosher and unkosher products, even though the person themselves kept kosher, because he or she would be touching unkosher products? I don't remember the reason. I don't remember the answer though.
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's actually an interesting question because it impinges on Shabbat as well. So often members of the more ultra-Orthodox community will have a business partner as one of their partners who's not Jewish to take care of Shabbat, ownership on Shabbat, and ownership of treif. But it is a really good question. I think most people say, well, I'm not, most Orthodox business people would take it quite literally and say, I'm not touching it. People who are working for me are. Okay, this is Aver Minachai. Do not eat anything you find already dead. Want to keep going, Michael? We're almost done with that.
You may give it to the foreigner residing in any of your towns, and they may eat it, or you may sell it to any other foreigner, but you are a person holy to Adonai, your God. Do not
And
cook
that
a
is
kid.
why in the United States, kosher butchers usually have a relationship with a non-kosher butcher, right? What's the part we don't eat? Filet mignon, right? Because it's from the part of the animal that is its hind quarter. We don't eat that because of Jacob's wrenching his hip. In Israel, they actually do eat that meat because they take the time to cut around it. Here, it just gets sold to a non-kosher butcher. And the last thing.
Do not cook a kid in its mother's milk.
Yes, which we as a Jewish people have taken that to mean don't have a cheeseburger. Okay, I'm going to go on because I want to get to some other more interesting stuff. I'm going to send this to you tomorrow if you wish. These are why to separate milk and meat, or how. Okay, so here's some questions. The traditional waiting period between eating dairy and meat is?
3 hours.
No, look at the wording.
From dairy to meat, is it an hour?
It's 0. It's wash your
0.
mouth
Oh.
out and spit out.
Oh, good.
Not at the same table, but
Dairy to meat, no waiting time. Meat
No
to
waiting
dairy, 3 hours.
traditional waiting period, the most traditional waiting period between meat and dairy is how many for your Orthodox relatives?
6 hours.
6.
6, but
Six.
most conservative Jews that you know, wait, how long? 3. Do any of you have any relatives who are Dutch? And if they're single, I'd like to marry one, because how long do they wait?
1.
1 hour. 1 hour. The Dutch Jews wait 1 hour.
Why is that?
Who asked the why?
Suzanne.
Yeah, I don't know. Just a tradition that they're an amalgamation of the Jews from the Spanish expulsion and then Jews that came through Germany. So a lot of those Dutch folks have Spanish names, and that I don't know why. That is just the tradition that Dutch Jews eat kitniot, eat beans on Passover and wait an hour between meat and dairy. I should know that. I don't know it. I will find out. Okay.
Rabbi, I think I had learned that it came from the tradition as to how long it was, like from one meal to another. You weren't allowed to eat. And so the Ashkenazim, it was 6 hours. The Germans, it was 3. I guess the Dutch ate often.
That's interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. So these are commonly found hechshers. What do you do in the community when you don't know if a hechsher is okay? You call me and I check it out. I think some of you know that I founded and ran for many years a food pantry, and it still operates. One of the things that we had to do, or that we chose to do, was to go to our local ultra-Orthodox community rabbis and say to them, which are the hechshers that are acceptable to your community? And there are other hechshers that I may have used, but we only used the ones that were acceptable to their community, because for our kosher section, because we wanted the most number of people to be able to eat there. Following foods do not require a hechsher. This is according to conservative Jewish law. I don't know what Orthodox folks do, but fresh or frozen fruits and vegetables, fish, eggs, milk, juice, coffee, tea, sugar, flour, spices. Okay. I want to get to I'm going to skip why I became a shochet. If you're interested, I'll send you the packet. So
Rabbi,
yeah.
is there a difference in fish, kosher fish and non-kosher fish?
Absolutely. You have to, kosher fish has fins and scales.
No, let's take a fish. No, I didn't say that properly. A fish that is kosher, that is bought from the kosher section versus a non-kosher section. Let's say salmon, which is kosher, but how is it slaughtered differently? Is it cut differently?
Okay, so no. The issue is, and it is an issue, what's the knife that they are using to cut it? There's a concept in kashrut called noten ta'am. Does the thing that you're cutting your knife with impart a hot flavor? So if I cut an onion, that knife, and if I cut an onion or a hot pepper, and then I'm cutting meat, that knife really is going to be a meat knife, because the onion and the hot pepper are going to carry the meat smell and feel on it. So there are many, many, many Jews who are Orthodox who will only eat fish from a kosher fish store or a fish where they know that it is done with a kosher knife. There are also many folks, myself included, who will buy fish and ask the fish person to use a separate knife that's clean. Many fish stores know to do that. And even ones that I used to get fish from a Japanese market and a Korean market. They understand that the Jews want a separate knife. So I don't know. I bought fish at Nassau and I've asked them, I bought like pre-cut fillets, but you can always ask the fish person to use a separate knife or a clean knife.
Okay, thanks.
Because right, like I don't want them cutting crab or I don't know what you.
McCaffrey's will do that for you as well.
Oh, really? That's great.
Yep.
Okay. Eating ethically. Who would like to read? And we'll just take about another 10 minutes. So eating ethically. Someone who hasn't read?
Rabbi, it's Fran. I'll read.
Thank you, Fran. Nice to see you. Go ahead.
Fran, you're muted.
Fran, you're muted.
Sorry, I had unmuted and it muted me. I'm not sure what. I'm not going to be able to do the Hebrew, Rabbi. You're going to have to help me with that.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't think that. Sa'ar ba'alei chayim.
Sa'ar ba'alei hayim. Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to skip it. Prevention of unnecessarily causing pain to animals. I'll try it.
Sa'ar ba'alei
hayim.
hayim.
Okay, is a basic Jewish value. Among the tradition's warnings on this subject are, you shall not plow with an ox and a mule harnessed together, since both animals being of unequal size will suffer. A person is forbidden to eat until they have fed their animals. Okay, you're going to have to go down. There is no difference between the pain of human beings and the pain of other living things. The love and tenderness of a mother for her young ones exists across species, according to Maimonides.
So we're stopping with that, which would then remind us or make us think about before the flood that we were originally intended to be vegetarians, because yes, we are given the concession to eat meat, but with strict rules to remind us that these are actually God's creatures as well. I have a lot of respect for those people who are vegans and vegetarians, because I think they really are living on a higher spiritual level. Okay, eco-kashrut. Thank you. Who is reading? Fran, you want to keep reading?
Sure. Eco-kashrut is an attempt to, quote, renew the unity of earth and humanity, close quote, according to Arthur Waskow. Eco-kashrut is an attempt to challenge the banality by which we consume and buy and bless and need. It is a call to stay away from the treif, literally torn by a wild beast, that which is dissonant with the preservation of the earth and we who dwell on the earth. It is a call to struggle with whether vegetarianism is the ideal form of eating, even though being a vegetarian does not absolve us of serious daily choices about what we buy and how much we consume. It is not only about labels and letters saying this food is kosher or not, but about making choices that reflect the unity of all creation, both bird and beast, woman and man.
So really, I think that kashrut, all of our kashrut, has to have an element of eco-kashrut in it and ethical kashrut in it. So if we're going to keep kosher, we have to also think about what we're doing to the environment. If we're going to keep kosher, we also have to think about what are workers being paid and what are the working conditions in a kosher factory. I think there was a book many years ago about a kosher meat packing factory where the immigrant workers were not paid a living wage and were living in terrible conditions. And the question has to be asked, if we treat our workers poorly and we don't pay them a living wage, how could that food ever be kosher? It's saying that our attempt at observing God's rules of how we eat and making us distinctive have to include how the people who produce that food are treated. Have you guys thought about that in terms of kashrut, and what do you think about it? The book, by the way, is about post-mill. Have any of you heard about post-mill? It's a really interesting book. I'll get the name of it. It is a kosher meat packing firm, and the feds came in because the workers were being treated so improperly, and it was a terrible, terrible blight on the Jewish people that a Jewish company was being prosecuted for how we treated human beings. And, you know, you got to say, it may technically fulfill the rules of kosher, but ethically it couldn't have. So you want to talk about where we are, what you think about ethical kashrut, and expanding how we think about kashrut to think not only about how it's killed and what we eat, but how the workers are treated and how the animals are treated. I think it's Evelyn and then Denise.
So Rabbi, this is not how the workers are treated, but I'm thinking about how the animals are treated. I'm seeing pictures of chickens sort of all, not caged, but in these very, very tight quarters, and the move for free range chicken or whatever. I don't know how good that is. So the question is, are chickens that will be slaughtered in a kosher way and sold as kosher chickens, are they handled in a different way than other chickens, meaning given more space rather than, in small quarters? And are they free range chickens? Is that part of what it means to have a kosher chicken, or is it just how it's slaughtered?
Well, that's really the question. And many people would say it's just how it's slaughtered. And I think that we know there's a company that I'd love for you to all look at. I'm going to type it here. Maybe actually, I think it's called Grow and Behold. So there are a company that says we are going to do kosher meat, and we're going to, though, make sure that ethical component is observed as well, that everything's free range. Yeah, I'm looking for the website. So, right, that's a question for those of us who keep kosher. Do we buy from Grow and Behold, or do we buy from a local purveyor? And I really feel like that is the question today. How do we source our foods? Have any of you bought from Grow and Behold?
I've been tempted. I'm going to bring up what Denise said about keeping kosher is more expensive.
Oh my God.
Grow and Behold has beautiful stuff. I mean, everything is gorgeous, fresh. You can get a ton of varieties of, you can get bison, but it is a fortune. It's extremely expensive.
Right. Now,
more than regular, and then you pay shipping. So,
I mean, they'll deliver to the area. I'm looking at their website right now. Kosher pasteurized meats. And I would absolutely say go onto their website. I think they're in Maryland. growandbehold.com, where you can order as much ethically sourced chicken and meat. And you also might need to take a mortgage out.
True.
So some people choose Evelyn. Do you like Evie or Evelyn?
Either one. I go back and forth.
I go back and forth between Andy and Andrea. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I've become Evie Grossman at the Jewish Center. Before that, I've been more Evelyn. But so maybe we'll stay with Evie Grossman because people seem to know me, I think, in that way.
My friends from rabbinical school know me as Tova. Yeah, I mean, the decisions that some people choose to make are they'll eat less meat and chicken, but they'll make sure it's free range. Empire now has a run of organic. which is a couple dollars more, but I tend to buy that now because I feel like it's got to be a little better. It's certainly better for the environment, but it is a concern.
So I have a question about the same concept with fish, farm raised
Oh
as
my gosh,
opposed to wild caught, right? Those farm raised fish, is that humane?
So my friends who are members of PETA, are any of you members of PETA? Would say none of it's humane. I mean, I don't know. Look, I am one of these people who, like many of you, like I think ethically it's better to be a vegetarian. And my body craves meat, both. I think that I think they're both kosher, but if we're looking at a larger worldview, what's better for the environment? Certainly not farm raised. But it's even kosher chicken's so much more expensive than non-kosher chicken. And the grow and behold stuff is so much more. By the way, it also tastes different. It tastes I certainly have had it. It tastes much gamier. It's free range, no hormones, no anything. And it does, taste different. I'll tell you, I stopped eating turkey for a very long time because I was on kibbutz and had to send turkey to the slaughter. Like literally had to pick up turkeys while wearing gloves and get turkey doo-doo all over me and put them in cages, and they were going off to slaughter. And you kind of feel like there's something wrong with that. I'm also, rabbinical school, I went to a slaughterhouse. I do feel like if we're going to eat meat, we should kind of understand that we're eating a living animal at some point. And I think that that's one of the things of consciousness of what are we doing? It's a living animal. And yet you'll see me buying kosher chicken in the kosher chicken aisle, but I, try to buy a little better. If anyone wants to do an order of grow and behold with me, let me know, because I would do a group order.
I think also the eco-kashrut, it plays into how you live your life with everything else that you buy or where you go to shop, right? There's so many places that don't treat their workers well. We know of factories, we know of businesses, companies, organizations that don't treat their workers well, and we won't go to those places or buy from them. So I think that also plays into, I just learned about this eco-kashrut right now. So, I have a whole another way of looking at everything now. It's kind of freaking me out a little bit.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's always good, right? It's always good to learn. And I want it when I make dinner, if I have to clean a chicken or do something, I won't eat. I don't eat. I have a whole different way of eating and not eating when I am touching like a chicken or certain meats. So, that also plays into like how we see things. And I think that being kashrut gives us even more of a deeper sense of what we're doing and why we're doing it.
And to that end,
More.
it's not just about people who keep kosher.
You're absolutely correct, Suzanne. Absolutely. You're right. Absolutely.
One of the things that I'll be honest, I'm struggling with as we bring the Kiddush crew back for this coming Shabbat is making sure that we don't waste food. And that is huge. And the respect for food, I think a lot of it comes through kashrut, but also folks who are intimate with working with, folks say, snap to tail and to use the whole part of an animal, regardless of what type of animal. So the relationships with non-kosher butchers for the fillet and the sciatic nerve, that kind of thing is really important. But even though, no, I don't keep kosher, there was a period of my life where I tried as best I could, but even still, it's the respect for food, and that there's a holiness in that. So I'm gonna say that, I because this is a no judgment zone, even though I have a holiness for food, and I think that my Jewishness is represented through that.
You know what, Suzanne, I'm so glad you said that, because I do apologize for that, because no, I know you're not saying anything, but it just brings to my attention that when I say keeping kosher, it really isn't just because I'm keeping kosher, right? It's because of the values and morals that you have as a person. So I'm so glad you said that.
And if that brought you to this point, that's so cool.
And I mean, I really do believe that our struggling with how we eat in this country, and do we eat local or not local, is a question of resources and how we distribute resources. So 25 years ago, a woman came to me and said, "Can you help me? I don't have enough money to buy medicine and food for my kids, and I don't know which one." I mean, a Jewish lady with 2 kids. And I was young. I was 28, right out of rabbinical school. What? Oh my God. You don't have enough money to pay for the medicine for your kids or the food. Which one? And that's when we started the food pantry. And I went to the local ministers, and they taught me how to run a food pantry, because the Jews weren't doing it. We were doing it for seniors, but not for young people. Like, you actually literally you could go to the senior center, and if you were over 65, you could get help, but not if you were raising 2 kids and your husband had, skipped town and you're trying to do this all. And it was so interesting, because we had to decide whether we were going to do a kosher pantry or just food. We ended up doing a kosher pantry on the theory that they can go to any community pantry. We want there to be a place where Jews who are in need could still be able to get the kind of food that they needed, and where we wouldn't discriminate against folks who chose to be Orthodox and who chose to follow laws of kashrut. And it just brings kashrut and how much it costs, or how much food costs in America, and where we get our food from, seems to be such the issue of inequity in our country, right? So I do believe that what we eat and how we eat is intimately connected to what our neighbors eat. There's a hero in the Cherry Hill community, the Brown family. Have you ever heard of the Brown family? They're members of a conservative shul. If you go on my Facebook page, I'm friends with the woman in the couple. Her name's Sandy. She and her husband own many ShopRites. Good business people. They also own Fresh Grocer, which is ShopRite's higher end brand. And they then specifically went into inner city Philadelphia and Camden and opened stores in food deserts and employed people, because they talked about, we can't keep kosher, which they do, and not worry about our neighbors having enough to eat and quality to eat. So kashrut is much larger than the ritual. It's also how we use food, how food is a sense of inequity in food, and right, food's the nurturer, right? That's why Suzanne has that kiddush crew. Food is what nurtures us. Everyone wants who doesn't want their mom, even if their mom's a blessed memory, to make them her favorite, whatever it is. It's our nostalgia piece. It takes us back to how we grew up and who we are. And hopefully a discussion about kashrut can also broaden our thinking about food and say, kashrut needs to be how we eat personally and how our neighbors eat, and if they have enough to eat. I'll get off my soapbox. Does anyone have any more thoughts or questions? I like to say to young folks who are considering, or older folks keeping kosher, like, this is definitely one of those mitzvot that you will not appreciate it until you try it, because it is complicated. I live in a small apartment, and now I have like meat in one room and dairy in one area because it's hard. But I also know that it connects me to other Jews around the world. But it informs how I think about food and animals and my neighbors who don't have enough. Okay, closing thoughts, anything you want to say, anything is good, bad? Let's stop the recording. Let's just, anyone want to say anything? Denise.
I just want to say that I've listened to a lot of different things about being kosher, and different rabbis, just to understand why different rabbis have their feelings. And I'm glad I did this and came to this class, because I haven't done it for a while, and it just gave me a whole new perspective. You know, after all these, I don't know, 35 or 40 years that I've been keeping, 35 years I've been keeping kosher, it just gave me a new perspective. And, you know, we're learning as always, right? I'm going to be telling my kids that, because they've been listening to me this whole time, and they've been listening to you. And I just think it gives a great new way of looking at things, even after all these years of being, keeping kosher. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, to those who choose not to keep kosher, there's like 613 mitzvot. None of us are doing all of them. So do the ones that you have a passion placed for. And if that means feeding other people or helping people who are poor, like, choose the ones that work for you right now. Though I will say, keeping some modicum of kashrut, like one thing, is something that can give you great meaning in terms of the discipline of how we eat and how we don't eat. We stopped the recording, right? Oh, stop the recording so we can just say whatever we want. I gotta say, I do yearn for a kosher deli. Oh my God, we need a kosher